We have a major problem with how we ramp new account executives. Your new AEs are being declared ramped at 3 or 6 months, but can they actually run discovery or execute the sales process without you jumping in to save them? Most can't, and that's the problem. Most sales teams ramp reps based on time in seat and not capability-based onboarding where you certify your new sellers. So I built a playbook full of frameworks, implementation roadmaps, and infrastructure guides that cut ramp time in half and have proven to improve win rates by 75%, and it's completely free. So stop this episode right now and go and download the Sales Readiness Playbook at therevenueenabler.com or use the link in the description below. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast, and today I'm joined by James. Hey James, how's it going?
Very well, James. Yourself?
I'm doing very well. 2 Jameses. It's going to make it very confusing, but we will get there. Looking forward to this chat. I'm going to be talking about improving forecasting or forecasting accuracy in 2026. Maybe just before we jump in, James, maybe just give the listeners that 30,000 foot view. Who are you? What are you up to at the moment? And then we can jump into the conversation. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Yeah, my name's James Matthews. Currently, I am the Chief Commercial Officer at Connected. Been in sales for 17 years, maybe now. Starting out as an individual contributor. Worked in data and commodity sales for a company called Informa. Set up sales teams in New York, Sao Paulo. Moved into startups with a company called AgFlow, based out of Geneva. They joined Connected at 50k ARR 5 years ago, and we're 15 mil turnover now. So built a few different sales teams from sort of one person to larger numbers over the years.
Amazing. So you've probably got a load of scars, made a load of mistakes, learned a load from those, and by the sound of it, figured things out to go from 50k to 15 million.
Yeah, I think I've made more than my fair share of mistakes, probably.
Yeah. And we weren't proud, right? And they're good learnings, and they're never really losses. They're just opportunities to learn and improve, right?
Yeah. Well, what is forecasting apart from another good chance to get it wrong, realistically, right? And it's another scar to learn from for next time, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really interesting topic. So like the kind of line of work that we do, a lot of the time, the sales lead will say, hey, we need to fix our deal slippage problem. And sometimes it's a pipeline compliance problem. Sometimes actually that deal, I would call it, isn't forecast ready. The rep is put into the forecast because our sales stages sometimes are designed based on meeting types. We believe we're at this stage because we've delivered a proposal, so we start to forecast it. And actually, one of the quick ways to fix it is around just actually having some good, strict compliance and definitions of what a forecast is. So I want to get into that today, but just from your perspective, what we do, what do you think are like one or two like biggest mistakes or challenges that sales organizations run into when it comes to forecasting?
Yeah, really interesting question and really interesting place to start. I think pipeline compliance, data hygiene, how you manage your systems, processes, pipeline in general is probably the biggest mistake that people make. If you don't have general pipeline health across an organization, then you're always going to be struggling to do a proper forecast, essentially. And it's okay maybe when there's a team of 4 or 5 or 6 people, but as soon as that starts to get bigger, then you start running into real problems. And you're talking about pipeline health. It is about definitions of different stages. It's about the methodologies that you're using and like deeply understanding that. I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and you're talking about reps onboarding but not being ready, and having an arbitrary 90 days or 180 days in to get ready, and then they're ramped and they're onboarded, and that's all well and good, but if they don't understand actually what these things mean and why you do them, then that leads to bad pipeline health, bad compliance, and therefore bad forecasting. So yeah, that's probably the big one. And I think the big one when you look at forecasting, well, actually most people see it as okay, well, the board or the leadership want to know where you are going to finish in that month or in that quarter, and where's cash going to be, and are we going to be over target or under target, which obviously is sort of the point of forecasting. But I actually think as sales leaders, it's a virtuous circle, right? It's a training exercise, and actually everything comes back to how qualified, how effective the salespeople and the sales management is, and that's where the usefulness of forecasting is, and actually it teaches you a lot of the lessons that you're talking about there, because when you get it wrong, you get it wrong for a reason. So it is a new scar, it's a new learning. It's oh, that's why that happened this time, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, I don't know about you, but when I got into sales 15 years ago, my boss didn't sit me down and go, right, this is how we forecast.
Yeah,
And these are our forecasting categories, and this is the definitions. They just said, is that a committed deal? And I was on a call and like other reps are committing this. I'm like, yeah, dude, we'll commit this one. You're right.
yeah,
I didn't even know what commit even meant. Like, and that now as I go out and do this thing that we do now with sales orgs, I'm like, as part of the onboarding, I just want to get clarity on like your internal systems and processes and language. I'm like, can you send me over your forecasting like one pager? And they're like, oh, we don't have it. I'm like, got it. So you've hired 6 reps in the last 2 quarters. What have you given them in terms of definition and how you guys run a forecast?
yeah.
Well, we just assume they're experienced reps. We just assumed that they know how to do a forecast. But isn't your business context very different? Even if you're a direct competitor, the context is different, right?
Yeah, well, the context is different, and like, what are you trying to achieve out of that forecast, right? Like, even if you say that you and I are equally qualified, when it comes to forecasting, we still probably look at it in different ways, and a commit is a really good example. If you strip it back to that base level, and 15 years ago, probably when we started sales, that was it, right? Are you going to commit this deal or not? And it's about, actually, it's not forecasting really. It's about getting blood out of the stone, and driving people towards that performance and getting the extra mile out of people and putting pressure on sales reps, but that's not necessarily a forecast. But some people still take things like that. Like, do you still use the term commits? We do sometimes, but that's not really how we mean them. And so I think psychologically it's difficult to get your head around, and people interpret terminology in different ways, again, if it's not clearly defined, right? So are you forecasting because you actually want to understand what revenue is going to happen, or is this psychological pressure to inflect on sales reps, which is a different thing? And I think maybe it's a little bit outdated these days. I don't think it happens too much, but that is a good example. Just the word commit runs true throughout all of the forecasting process. And so, yeah, if it's not clearly defined, it's going to be interpreted in different ways. And now you've got 30 different people forecasting in different ways, which makes it very hard to kind of triangulate where people are going to fall.
I was really hoping you was going to say you've now got 30 different ways that people are forecasting. It's like the sales process. If we don't have like clarity on exit criteria from S1 to S2, for example, it's okay when I've got 4 sellers. I've probably got the capacity to get into the weeds with them on those deals. But when I've got 30 sellers or whatever the number is, that's a lot harder. And also, like, not a good use of time. If we've got clarity, everyone moves in the same direction in the same way.
Well, this is it. When you come back to systems and a lot, maybe a lot of stuff that we discuss here, I'm still a big believer, actually, in some more old school techniques. That conversation is not outdated in terms of speaking to your reps and understanding deals and going and doing pipeline reviews, all of that sorts of classic stuff. I think it's still really rich. Actually, you can uncover a lot of things that get missed or interpreted the wrong way. But you can't do that when you've got 30 sellers, like, in a deep level. And it's, again, when I started, I think I was on a team of 4 or 5 people, and you would be sitting with your manager 20 minutes a day, or an hour going through these sessions. But time is sparse now. I think people are asked to do a lot more. Our tech stacks are better, deeper. We're expected to do many more things, and so that contact time is reduced. So if you don't have the other stuff that's on point, you can't afford to do it all that way. Although I think it still has a big place in the forecasting process.
I agree. And also, a lot of orgs are like trying to move to these AI like these tools that have like AI forecasting. And don't get me wrong, like a big fan of AI. We've built, I don't know, 30 custom GPTs, with vibe coding, SaaS apps now and Lovable. But you could just start with Chat GPT. Like one of the things we rolled out for a couple of CROs we work with is like pull the data straight out of Salesforce or HubSpot and dump it into this custom GPT, which is called like CRO Forecast Analyzer. And it just buckets up the forecast based on your forecast category and gives you like a 3-line talk track for the board when you're going through it. And it starts to like call out the risk and the gaps. And that's helpful, but it's also helpful for then like jumping straight into coaching opportunities with my sellers and going, right, for these 3 deals for Bob, there's a pattern here.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know, I'm interested to hear you talk about vibe coding. I totally haven't done it. Lots of people at our organization do, so interested to hear how you've got on from that perspective. I think the problem with the AI stuff is like, look, if you come into Connected, you come into the organization, you could be as good or better than me at forecasting stuff. But actually, if you don't know historically where we get our stuff wrong and why we get it wrong and what's happened, and you don't have the internal scars that I do from this organization, it's a lot harder for you to be as effective as I am, because I've 4.5 years of making mistakes trying to forecast numbers in this way, and so actually if for forecasting you take all of that stuff out and you drop it into AI and AI says this, it's difficult then to trust where that AI might be wrong, right? And that AI doesn't have those scars necessarily, and so you lose that richness, that foresight of those years of sort of missed experience, and so that's where I think those things are dangerous, or dangerous initially. They just need to be calibrated or coordinated, I think, over time, so you can learn the mistakes maybe that the AI makes or the way that works. But otherwise, I think you shouldn't initially trust something, right? You need to be testing it over a 3 to 6 month period to see how it goes and where it makes mistakes, because inevitably it will. I totally can't remember, aside from the AI, where we were.
Yeah, no, spot on. And actually, like to talk about that really quick, because I know AI is such a hot topic, and you're absolutely right. And I always say, like, AI without context is just actually not very helpful. Like, if I went to ChatGPT and said, "Yo, write me a 2,000 word blog on sales forecasting," it would just be garbage, right? So it has to have the context, and that's where people like you can get loads of value from AIs, because you've got the scars. You open up a one pager and go, these are all of the mistakes we've made in the last 7 quarters when it comes to forecasting. Deals will slip for these reasons. They'll stall out for these reasons. We'll lose to no decision for these reasons. Give it all of the context. Feed it into the back end of the GPT so it has your specific context for your business, and then feed it the forecast or whatever exercise you're doing. And then I call it like last mile transportation. Do you know what I mean? Try and drive into the city, right? And they're like, hey, we'll just give you the bus for the last mile. That's where the human being is required. Right. But it should be able to give you a big chunk of it if you feed it the right context. And then you can spend more time coaching and developing rather than in 17 spreadsheets and 4 Salesforce dashboards.
Totally. That's spot on. It's the last mile stuff. Great tool. Don't rely on it for the answers, but it can help you to get to all of the right answers, right? Sometimes it might have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so quick question for you. So we've got a listener. They're an A that's just been promoted to a head of sales role in a startup, and the CEO's like, we've got new investors, they want us to start forecasting. Where do I go? Like, what would be the default forecast categories that you would put into place?
Yeah. I guess, how do you see it? Well, if you're starting from absolutely scratch, where do you go?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's a few different layers, right? When you look at stuff, and I'm assuming here that these businesses will probably have a tech stack. If you don't, start getting a tech stack, and you have to define your sales process, I think, first. And so, maybe if you're a really early stage startup, and let's kind of talk to the layman here. So, okay, we just sell stuff, and we know it gets done, and maybe the founder has been selling it, or the first AE, and they're a grad, and they don't know processes, right? So let's assume that's the scenario. First of all, I think you have to define that sales process, and actually, if you are not entrenched with sales, Connected does fractional work, by the way. And so I would highly encourage, I was hired very early doors in Connected as a sales leader at that time. I think it was a very aggressive hire, and I'm very fortunate that it worked out. I would encourage people getting in touch with people like yourself to help define what that sales process is, how that should work, what that should be, because that is the foundation of it all, right? And if you don't have that, it's really difficult to forecast because, again, you don't have those clearly defined things that you can actually earmark. Or has this happened? Is it actually at that stage? How close is that deal? You know, it's all of the classics when people get into sales, like, you know, this is definitely coming in because they
Yeah.
feel it. It has that vibe of just like, oh, that person was so positive, you know, and you're like, well, maybe you just caught that person on a good day, or they're really nice, but you know, actually you've missed all of the technical elements out of this sales process, you know, that it should be. And so, you know, define a sales process, start from there. If you're defining a sales process, I think always work backwards from, okay, the last customers that bought it, like, why did they buy it, and what had to happen, you know? And look, go from there. I'm a big believer, I think, across sales organizations, that you should always define your own sales process and your own sales methodologies. You can apply medpic processes, challenges, that, you know, whatever preferred sort of theory and process stuff might be for you. Use elements of all of it, but I would always try and define it for my own organization, what works for my product and my ICP, and go from there. And so once you've got those things, then, you know, I guess actually you can then put a system against some arbitrary numbers, really, and deal stages, and do some really basic level forecasting like that. I wouldn't even say that that's forecasting, but it's more understanding actual size of your pipeline, right? And I think a lot of people, particularly founders or early AEs, open up any deals that are just never going to put it in there. And, oh, my pipeline is £5 million, right? And so I think those deal stages will start to actually define what's actually in those pipeline, how far down those pipelines are they, and then you can go from there. Understanding of close dates, of deadlinings, of how you're managing next steps and deal cycles is the other bit. You know, if you want to start to understand forecasting by month, by quarter, but you know, that kind of system will give you a basic way of implementing basic forecasts. And I think you know, you have to do all of that stuff first. So that would be my step one.
Okay.
Your step one?
100%. I wrote down foundations. Foundations over going and spending £200,000 on a tech stack before you got the foundations. You need a CRM because you need to bake in the, you know, the stages and the exit criteria and stuff. But you also don't need to go and apply, you know, a Gong and which we're a partner of, or a Clary or whatever it might be yet. You need to just make sure we're set up for success, set up shop, and then we can layer on everything else. So yeah, spot on.
Yeah, and I think you take, yeah, you need a CRM. You're right, but actually, sales process then is more important than any other tech stack that you can get, right? And that's get a clear idea of why people buy your product, you know, or if you don't have product market fit, well, like, why should they? Why would they? What are we trying to do here, and why? And that's more important, I think, than everything else. And yeah, that is the foundations, right?
Yeah, I agree. And also think about it. I was talking to sales leadership team this morning we're doing some work with, and I was like, think about how you actually want to bucket things up. So like in one of the things that we're vibe coding at the moment is like a forecasting module where the rep can call their deals and then the manager can call the roll up, and then they can like have some pacing and just see how they're trending and things like that. And I was saying to them, look, actually, you might find that one deal, like let's say I was trying to do a deal with, I don't know, I'm making this up, IBM. Yeah. IBM could sit in a couple of different buckets, but if I just tick one deal with commit, it sits in one deal, one thing which is in commit. Now, when I need to talk to the board or into the leadership, I want to paint a picture and say across all of our sales organization, we are committing these 5 deals. However, some of these deals sit in this bucket and this bucket for these reasons. We've got this commit bucket, we've got this most likely bucket, and then we have this best case bucket. Our best case bucket is if the sales gods are on our side, they want us to be successful this quarter, we've, you know, done all our good things, this is where we could land. We then have these committed deals where we're like 90% confident that you can go and spend that revenue right now because it's going to happen. And then we believe there's this most likely, and that's going to have a blend of committed deals and some deals in best case. That doesn't work for everybody, but just think about how you then bucket all those up so you can manage up effectively and tell that story to the board, who in some cases they are investors who are financial analysts who've never spent a day in sales, so they don't understand the nuance and things like that you mentioned, so that you can communicate cross-functionally, north to the board, down to your people, and have that like common language.
Yeah. You mentioned the sales gods. That would be a different conversation. What have you sacrificed to the sales gods over the years? What would you sacrifice to the sales
depends how good the quarter's looking, James. Anything and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly my hair, but
yeah. No, look, I mean, that totally goes back to, I think, where we started, right? It's like, I think a 3-tiered bucket policy of best case, of like fair and balanced, and like, okay, these are coming in. It is a really good way to do it. That's what we use at Connected. And like, this comes back to the training part, right? Is the beautiful thing about that is actually at any time you can take a snapshot of, actually, let's say you have 20 reps and you record all of this systematically. It will tell you about how your own sales process, sales training, sales management is going. Like, are reps getting these things roughly right? If not, why not? Who is overcommitting? Who is undercommitting? Why are they doing it? What are they missing out? And so, again, for a sales leader, I think actually this is your best, not training tool, but it tells you where to focus, where people are going wrong, what to look at, like what pipeline reviews do you really need to do deeply, right? And you'll know, because those buckets will be totally off for the people where you really need to focus, right? And it's because something is misaligned or misunderstood ultimately.
100%. And again, this is a lovable thing, but one of the things we've added is deal slippage analytics. So like, out of all of our sales reps, how many of their deals slip? And then when they slip, where do they go? Do they go into one, or do they go into loss? If they go into loss, then maybe there is a qualification problem. If they go into one, maybe there's like a decision process or a paper process skill gap when we look at the MedPick framework. And it's like, well, first I need to actually have the context at the rep level, not just like the frustration from a board meeting. I actually need the data that says, do you know what? James Bissell, every single quarter, like 27% of his deals slip. And of those 27% of those deals slip, 85% of them land in close one. So when I actually now have that data, I can go, well, we win the deals, but they just slip. So maybe it's just lack of clarity on how the organization makes a decision, or if it's an enterprise deal, like, does he actually fully understand like the moving parts of infosec and legal and red lines and how long that typically takes? And is he thinking he can get there faster than actually the reality is? And it's just like a one-on-one coaching conversation, and I can kind of fix that problem pretty quick if I have insights to the data.
I mean, look, totally, that's it. And look, I'm on the board at Connected. I think boards, investors, commonly are commercial people, because actually you can learn a lot from this sort of information, right? If you're sitting on a board, or like, Connected board advisory and non-executive work, if you're sitting on a board advisor or a non-exec or an exec director, and actually forecasts have been missed, drill down into this data, right? Because that is going to tell you where the problems lie. Like, is this something underlying? Is this a repeated problem? Is this something you need to be really worried about? Can this actually be fixed with training? If so, how much training? What is the upside going to be? There's answers to so many interesting questions, I think, that are buried in missed forecast data, that would just help businesses get better, and businesses, not just the sales function.
Yeah, 100%. From your perspective, then, where does like a medic or a medpick or something like that come into this? Is this something that you're using at the moment? Is it something that most organizations should look at? What do you feel about using medic as a qualification forecasting tool?
So we've used it in the past. We don't use it at Connected. So Connected, we're predominantly B2C. So an interesting thing, forecasting for us, we're like high ticket, I suppose, £2,000-ish average order value B2C product. So a different sale to actually what I've done all of my life predominantly, which is B2B. And so speaking on kind of the B2B stuff, it's still important, by the way, if you're not using Medic or if you're not using MedPick, that you still are using a defined methodology or a way to understand and judge where deals are, even if it's not that. And there are elements of MedPick that still apply to us at Connected. So I think, like, firstly, it can help in the same way that you're talking about the 3 buckets of 3 different cases. If things aren't filled in, you can apply positive or negative sentiment to deals coming in, dependent upon what is properly or not properly qualified. You can even go as far as, like, as a managerial resource, if things aren't coming in, just altering percentages on forecasting, but it's dependent upon medpic. But, like, I would use it mostly as an interrogation technique before the misses, hopefully, of, like, okay, well, this deal is in commit. Where is this? Against medpic, where does it sit? Am I happy with all of the answers? Is this full understanding? Have things just been put in here for administrative reasons, even if things aren't understood by salespeople? And so I think, it can help you to be slightly more accurate. Where I would particularly focus with this, and particularly if you're in B2B and you're forecasting quarterly, you probably have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 big swingy deals in there that is really going to impact your forecast. And it makes it really difficult, right? If your average order value is 10K, but you've got 4 opportunities for 300K, in the pipeline, then how do you really accurately forecast? And I think, in those instances, you have to then go back to your basics, back to your conversation, your deep interrogation of not just pipelines, but specific deals, and you need your best people on those deals, and you need them to really understand, deeply where things are against medpic and why it matters, right? And how does that organization work, and that's where, to me, often when I think of medical medpic, when it's done badly, it's sales training for the sake of sales training, and people using it as administrative exercise. And this comes into orgs that are consciously competent around these things. And, like, this is where you'll see, I think, the vast majority of top performing reps in sales organizations, they get it, and when they get it and they understand why you're doing these things, why they matter, how they're going to impact that deal, rather than filling in boxes in a CRM, that's actually why you implement medpic, right?
So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills, and it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to the revenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions. I think some people also do it to buy themselves a bit more time in their role as a sales leader. They can communicate, here's an initiative, we're going to do this, we're going to do it because I feel like I've got nothing else to do next other than really solve the real problem. And that's why I sometimes reject, I'll get an inbound, like, hey, can you come and do like a 1-day medic workshop with our team? I'm like, dude, I don't even have the energy to tell you why that won't work. You should probably just go and, do something else other than, do it with us. But yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And some of the things that you can think about here is, from a metrics perspective, one of my favorite ways of maybe just temperature testing the quality of the forecast in some cases by saying, well, how long does it take us typically to win a deal? I'm just making this up. Let's say it's 90 days. Okay. Typically at the right, if it's core ICP, it's our bread and butter, typically takes us 90 days. And then I got 2 deals in the forecast that have been their deal age is 280 days. I just look at some data and I'm like, when a deal takes 3 times as long as it does to win, do we typically win or lose those deals? In most cases, you'll lose them.
Yeah, almost 0%, right? You'd almost disregard them from a forecast, I think. Unless they're, again, really exceptional circumstances and you deeply understand why this person is there, like it erodes almost to nothing. I would
Exactly.
say, when you're talking about slippage in general, yeah, obviously deals slip and that happens. But actually, once they've missed that, okay, the close date was going to be 30th of January and now it's 30th of February. Just moving it once, chops that in half, as a percentage likelihood, if not more, right? If it's been moved twice, now you're talking about less than 10% of those deals probably are coming. It moved 3 times, forget about it,
Yeah.
pretty much. And so, yeah, I think slippage is one of those fundamental mistakes of this person's really positive. They want to buy. Actually, what's happened there? You're not speaking to the buyer. They've no power. They're not even a champion in this process. All of these sort of things that typically get misaligned by people that haven't been in sales for a while, but move them out. And actually, again, I think learning to lose is an important bit in anything in sales, right? Lose fast when if you can actually disqualify those deals and they're not going to come in. It's going to leave you much more time to concentrate on the ones that are, and so big bulky pipelines are the worst thing,
Yes.
right? And it's just like it riles me as a sales manager leader, to go, oh look, here's a few hundred deals in a pipeline. You're like, well, how are you? What are you doing? How are you managing your business? Who are you? What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know,
What are you doing, life? Oh, James, you're talking my language. Yeah. So I call it pipeline bloat. At the beginning of the quarter, we bloat the pipeline because we've pushed everything from Q3 to Q4. So it looks really good. And then 10 days into the quarter, someone's put a pin in it. It's popped and it's shriveled up. And you're like, holy fuck, where's that all gone? It's like, there's nothing in there in the first place. You'll probably lost 70% of it.
Yeah.
Again, comes back to pipeline compliance. And that is literally comes back to, have we educated our sellers on what good looks like across the full sales process and the customer's buying journey?
Yeah, and look, ultimately, that's always going to come back to the sales leadership, right? Because one, it's an education, it's a learning development thing for those salespeople, but two, it's the systems. It's actually, are you on top of it? And look, if you start taking your eye off it, these things do blow, right? Whether it's a little bit or a lot is a different thing. And so, it's one of those things in sales. It's no matter how good your salespeople are, if you're not enforcing it in sales management, there is going to be a bloat there, right? It's just a little bloat or a big bloat. And look, it happens to us, happens to me. I'm sure it's happened to you too, right? And then when you are in that kind of bloated bit, like now you're so limited what you can do in forecasting because actually you can't trust so many data points, right? And like forecasting ultimately is about a triangulation of those conversations, about how people feel about things, of what the data says, where the processes are at, what does the sales methodology say, what are the trends in the environment, like macro, where should we be, are our targets too low or too high, how are we performing, what's the social, political, all of these sorts of things. And actually you're trying to just bucket them, squeeze them all together and go, right, it's pretty much in the middle of what all of that data says. But if that data is corrupt, then it's sort of finger in the air stuff, right? And that's the problem with bloat is, I don't know, you're trying to throw a dartboard and no glasses on, right? For me, you can't see anything. It makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, 100%. And even if you don't want to roll out something like Medic, like you can even just use the 3 whys, or I kind of added 2 extra ones to them to make it the 5 whys. But like, as we know, it's like, why change? Why now? Why us? If you want to take it to the next stage, maybe like, why them and why nothing? So why would they buy from somebody else? And then if they decided to do nothing, why would it be? Maybe I'm selling. So one of the teams I built was a HR tech business. So maybe we're talking to the VP of HR about, building out their OKR stack because, they want to make sure that they increase, performance across the organization. But maybe the sales director is also thinking about moving from, spreadsheets to Salesforce. That's a completely different department, completely a different initiative. But the money comes out of one part at the end of the day. And it's a race now between me and the competing AE who can build the most compelling business case and enable my champion to tell the value story. So I need to understand, like, why could they do nothing? And how do I just get that clarity across those 5 whys without having to use a medic or a med pick first? Simple.
Yeah. I look, the simpler the better, right? When it comes to don't pollute it. It's the classic saying, that, clever people make clever things sound simple, right? And that's what you're trying to do with forecasting. And yeah, look, why change, why now, why us? Great example. Like that's something easy to implement, easy to understand. And you can roll out and make it formulaic quite quickly. So I'm a big fan of the more simple it is, the better. And just on the why nothing, like this probably is the most underestimated bit in sales, right? Of like everyone always thinks about why them, but people lose an alarming amount of deals to why nothing. Most deals, probably for most people are no action, rather than a competitor. Almost all outbound stuff for sure, but probably still a lot of inbound stuff. Or at least at that moment in time. And so, yeah, I think that is a really underestimated one. And again, that comes back to sales process and how you qualify and how you deliver value, and understanding the buyers and the chat, and everything else. And so again, like big virtuous circle and forecasting teaching you where you're going wrong.
Yeah. 100%. There's an exercise I did with a team 2 weeks ago in London. I actually want to get the exact stat up here. So we were rolling out Medic for their sales organization, and it's the classic, we only have like one or two competitors that we run up against, and they're selling like marketing tech. And I was like, cool, have you guys ever heard of this thing called the Martech map? And they were like, no, what's that? And I was like, well, here we go, I've got the numbers. So in 2022, in the marketing tech space, there was 9,932 vendors. And then in 2023, it grew to 11,000. And last time I got that number was at 2023. So I can't imagine what it's like now in 2026. And then on the map is 11,032 to be specific. Classic salesperson exaggerating everything. All of these little logos, you can't even see who they are because they're so small. And what I was saying to them basically is, although you might believe you've got something really good to talk to the market about, and although you might only have, say, 3 or 4 direct competitors, there are 11,032 other people that also believe they've got a lot of value to offer the VP of marketing or the CMO, and they are all fighting for the same pot of money. And we need to have that real clarity on where do we stand compared to everybody else on there. So competing initiatives versus them deciding, do you know what? Good is good enough. And I'm just going to stick with what I've got because it feels safe. I'm trying to get a promotion. I don't want to damage my reputation by bringing in a bad vendor. So I'm going to stay where I am. And if we just use the why change, why now, why us, we might miss the why them or why nothing. And those are good coaching opportunities, good opportunities to inform our forecast so that us as the sales leadership team don't go to the board and say, hey, we're going to do £1 million. We ended on 175 grand. What the fuck happened? No idea. I didn't have that clarity. So going back to your point earlier, which is so important, I think you nailed it, is you've got to get the foundations right. The foundations have to be in place. If you don't, everything else is diluted. It's confusing. It doesn't make sense. You can't rely on it. And it gives you a massive headache.
Yeah. And look, that's a really good point for competing on a pot of money, right? Like people are going to spend stuff to solve problems, and there might be 3 or 4 problems or 3 or 4 competitors for your problem, but there's 100 different marketing problems that company might be trying to solve, right? Which ultimately will come down to the same things, which can be CAC and LTV and everything else, people might look at in those departments. And so, look, if the clarity of your why change, why now, why us, of who our ICP is, what our sales process and methodology is, and how do we get from A to B, the clearer that it is, the more likely that you're going to win versus different problems. So it's foundations
It is. And with that in mind, like one last kind of question before we wrap here, James. What's the cadence look like? So I get people say, how often should I run it? Am I doing it too often? If it's transactional, do I do it weekly or a couple of times a week? If it's enterprise, do I do it bi-weekly, monthly? Like, what have you found just works best? Have you got like a format that you typically stick to?
I mean, look, I think it depends what you're trying to achieve. I think it depends on the size of the organization and the sales cycle too. If you've got a 6-month sales cycle, there's no point doing weekly forecasts, right? Because it's not going to change that much. And same if it's really high value products and it's a much smaller pipeline, I think you manage that in a different way to a business like Connected, which is a huge pipeline of little deals, you know. So we can probably forecast much more regularly than other businesses, but you know, again, base it around however your group is managing performance. So is that on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis, you know, typically for people in different roles, and then adapt your sort of cadence from there. Ultimately, if we're looking at monthly stuff, you know, we start forecasting mid-month if you're looking at monthly, and then we'll run one in sort of third week of the month roughly to see where we're at. From a quarterly perspective, I think, look, the earlier that you can start, the better, because you can start to identify problems that aren't there. The better the systems are, the better the fundamentals, the earlier you're going to be able to start to understand some of that stuff, right? And so if you don't have those things in place and you're running monthly stuff, you're not going to be able to forecast until right up at the end, because you can't see things, understand things, cut out the noise and all of that sorts of stuff. But if you do, actually you can start running them at the start of the month, you know. And I'm really to get a clear picture on where you need to be. Do you need to build more pipeline? What do you need to push through? Why? When does this become balanced? What are you missing? Like, how do you influence things? You know, I guess to finish on things, one of my bugbears, I think, or with like new sales managers, is they'll do a forecast and they'll be, yeah, here's my forecast, and my forecast is £1 million, right, for this quarter, and it's great, it's above target, or it's a bit shit, it's below, right, or whatever. But it's like, again, it's like it teaches you stuff, right? It's like, actually that number you should be then using to influence the result, right? And if you understand why that is £1 million, well, actually you now understand your pipeline from going through that exercise. So what is missing, what is wrong? And if you're doing that more ahead of time, now all of a sudden actually doing that accurately means you're more likely to hit that £1 million, or maybe that £1 million could be 1.1 million pounds, you know, or whatever it may be. And so forecast in and of itself is inherently valuable, you know, and so use it to influence rather than just to produce a static number that you give to the board and never think about again, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And I have this I don't know if it's unique, but it's my point of view on Medic. I see a lot of people talking about Medic on LinkedIn these days, and it is a methodology, it isn't a methodology, it's a qualification tool, it's a forecasting tool, whatever you think is how you use it. My point of view on it is I talk about this all the time, it's a GPS. Like I strongly believe there is risk in every single deal in your pipeline until there is dry ink on that contract, right? And I want to be fully aware of that risk so that I can get ahead of it, or I can do something about it, or maybe say, do you know what? I know this deal looks good on paper. It's wriggled with risk, and the decision criteria has got, you know, competitor language in it, and I can see there's a strong relationship with a competitor. Like, I feel like I'm not going to win this one. I'd rather invest my time somewhere else. And if you think about it as a GPS, I actually see Medic as a collaboration tool. Like, if you think about all of the components, it's actually really for the buyer. So like, if you think metrics, these are things that business has to improve to keep driving their business forward, and they want you to help them do it. If you think about the economic buyer, this is a person doesn't want to walk into that board meeting next quarter and communicate that metric or that objective is still at risk, and in fact it's getting worse. So if you just think about all of the different components, the champion is a person that gives a shit. They got vested interest, selfish vested interest, because they're going for a promotion, they're looking for a commission or a pay rise, or they just want to finish work at 5 and play with their kids, or go play tennis, or not sit up until 9 o'clock on spreadsheets, right? If you actually think about Medic and you layer that over the top of your sales pipeline, it actually helps you execute the sales process. It's not a checklist. If you use a checklist, it will not enable you to go and drive consensus and drive that deal to the finish line.
Yeah, I love that. And again, like, you know, this comes back to the conscious competence and understanding what is important about the economic buyer, and getting into the mindset of the economic buyer or the champion there, as you used as an example. So yeah, I think that's really great. I guess another thing that I'd add is, I think compass, GPS, great way to put it. Also internally for communication, you know, I think these kind of things will allow, you and I are both AEs at the same organization, then at least we can kind of talk to each other about our own pipelines and our own deals in similar terms, and so actually like having something like that runs across the organization. I would also say that marketeers or like customer teams, everyone should have a basic fundamental understanding of Medic or the equivalent thing that you're using in your organization, because it helps all of the different departments to collaborate and communicate on why you win and why you lose.
Yeah, and if it's a really big deal, or you are running, big deals in your business, then, having that context pushed through. Like one of the things that I set up in my last org, because we were selling to like Amazon, Coca-Cola, massive orgs, is I just hooked up Gong to Slack, so that if a deal in our forecast and something came up in the conversation, it would kick that into a Slack group, and maybe it'd go to like marketing, and it would say, hey, here's a critical deal in our forecast. They're talking about metrics. We actually don't have any case studies or any content that talks directly to this metric. And it would inform our marketing organization that that's kind of some of the stuff we need, or something that would come up in the decision criteria that maybe we didn't have. And that could go into a Slack channel with product, and product could then click that link, go to that 49 minutes and 18 seconds in the call. They go straight to that part of the call and they're listening to it. And then they could maybe be like, hey, that's actually a really cool use case. We actually probably should develop that. Would you make the intro? We just lose. I think we've lost touch in sales now of like actually doing the work rather than just trying to get AI to automate all of it.
Yeah, you've got to get it right though. I think that's like, again, really great use case. Like again, we automate. We use Jiminy rather than Gong, but like, we automate a lot of our administrative stuff in HubSpot that we use through AI, and so it cuts out a lot of the administrative, like filling in of MedPick or your fields that you would use in HubSpot. So that's all done really quickly. But again, it should be used to enable
Exactly.
then stuff to be done other things, and not just I don't really need to think about Medic anymore, because actually it's just automatically done by AI after my sales call, and therefore that makes it less important. It should actually be giving you more time to invest in why that's important.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, and I think I'm digressing here, but I'll wrap on this. I don't know what it is, but I still love pen and paper. I use note takers. Like I was on a discovery call this morning, and I'll use that transcript to help me build my business case, and like then I'll just fine tune it. But I still think there's value in me stopping and looking at an opportunity, looking at qualification, and actually like going, where is the risk here? It feels too good to be true. There's got to be something here. What am I not seeing?
Yeah.
And actually stopping and doing the work.
Yeah, and look, there's maybe you and I are going to be showing our age here, but there is something in writing it down and seeing it, of like, look, I'm a big believer actually when you're going through and you're doing, if you're checking pipeline compliance and stuff like that, as much as it could be a massive pain in the ass to do it, like, actually, it's really good to go and do it yourself, like manually go and scrub the fuck out of your own team's pipeline, right? Because now you know why it's bloated, where people are going wrong. Like you learn so much from doing that. Yeah, it's like a manual task. I know it's not a manual task, right? I like a pampered white collar worker over here. God, my dad would be going, manual work scrubbing a hypothetical pipeline. Anyway, but you know what I mean? You can learn so much from actually seeing all of that. So yeah, AI could do it, but you sort of lose the learnings from it, and I think there's a lot of value in actually writing that stuff down. We're still human. You writing that down, thinking about it, processing it will help. I've sort of ditched the pen and pad, but I'm notes on my phone for like everything, and always looks like I'm, I don't know, doing something on my phone, but like, I've got 10 notes a day that's on there from all of the meetings that I have. And like, I'll read them, I'll prep for meetings. And to me, yeah, same thing. I have to do it. Otherwise it doesn't exist. If AI doesn't, if you don't recognize it and if you don't learn from it, that actually you're getting worse. And I think there is a big danger of that with AI. Sometimes if you're just assume stuff will get done and you are not paying attention, you'll get worse. You'll get less effective.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things I'm trying to do more of on these podcasts, and maybe we'll just give this a crack here, is like try and maybe put in an exercise. So one of the things I was thinking as we were getting ready to have this conversation today, what could one be? If you're a sales lead and you're listening to this and you're like, do you know what? We do see a lot of deals slip. I do have a massive migraine when it comes to forecasting. Just create a new Google form, or if you've got like any form software that you use, and just have literally 3 questions, like define, commit. These are your forecast questions. Define, commit, define best case, define pipeline, and ask your sellers to type into that box what they believe the definition is, and ask them to put in there 1 or 2 deals in their forecast for the quarter that match that. And then look at the output in a Google sheet or the output, and just see how different the definition for each one is, because that could make all of the difference between how you run your forecast moving forward. It actually could just be a really quick fix.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, as you're saying that, if my VP of sales was listening to that, I'm sure he'd be cringing thinking about 30, 40 reps going and writing definitions of exactly what those things are and how different they are. And
yeah,
and look,
but you said earlier, you want to see that though. You want to know where the problem is, so I can learn from it and go, do you know what? I'm just going to communicate to the board now. Like, I'm really confident we're going to be able to solve this forecasting problem, because we've identified 47 sales reps have all different definitions of what our forecasting categories are, and we've learned massively from it. Here's our plan.
And look, like coming back to like foundational level stuff, right? This is sort of forecasting done right or wrong, and like stuff like this and painful exercises that you are going to cringe and wince and go, oh shit, where are we? They're the fucking valuable ones to do, right? It's like, actually, when forecasting is wrong is when there's an inexperienced person that is filling in checklists, that is hiding behind a forecast that they don't understand, that they don't know it's right. There's no fucking point in doing it, you know? So it's like, it's the getting it wrong, it's the scars, it's the uncomfortable exercises, is where all of the value lies, you know, I think with all of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I'm conscious that it's 3 minutes until you've probably got your next meeting, and this has been so much fun. I could probably stick around and talk about this another 4 or 5 hours, and I'm sure you could as well, but we'll have to wrap. But this has been super helpful. I'd highly recommend you go and follow James on LinkedIn. We'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes and in the communication that goes out. But I think the core thing to take away from here is, and James nailed it early, is foundations. Get the foundations right. Get your pipeline compliance document put together. Get your reps aligned on it. Train them on it. Sign them off on it, and then just get them to run the sales process that's aligned to that, so that when you look at the forecast, you have confidence. Those 12 deals that are in stage 4, they're in there because we've achieved everything that we need to on the way. We might not win them all, but we have a higher probability of winning them because we followed what good looks like for our context. Not my buddy who's a VP at a different company and he just passed over their compliance document. It has to be relevant to your context. Otherwise, it's not going to be as accurate as you want it to be.
Totally. So, you can't just sacrifice things to the sales gods and pray forever.
No, you can't. No, I've tried. I've donated plenty of my hair in startups and they weren't that kind to me. So yeah, like, classic signal of a sales leader is receding hairline.
It's a similar stage.
Yeah. I'm just gonna shave it all off and just go with it. Yeah.
Me too. I normally do. This is long for me. This is practically a dreadlocks version of James Matthews.
The problem I've got is I don't really have the face shape for. I use one of those AI tools to see what it would look like, and it's not a strong look. So I'm desperately holding on to it.
Yeah. I've just lost the will to care, to be honest. And
that's it. I've been with my missus now for like 13 years, so I'm like, I'm good. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got no one else to impress anymore. We're good. We got a baby. I'm just gonna put weight on and lose my hair, and eat a lot of food and have a good time.
Yeah,
I'm definitely digressing now.
Yeah.
On that sad note, let's go and have something to eat, shall we?
Cheers, James.
Awesome. I'll see you soon. Cheers, James. All right, thanks for listening to this episode. I've got something else I want to give you before we wrap up here. So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills. And it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to therevenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions.